Mindful of everyone's time. So let's begin. And we are going to make this available for folks. So aloha and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what promises to be an important and timely conversation. My name is Banette Misalucha, Executive Director of the Workforce Development Council. For those of you who may not be aware, the WDC is the planning and policy advisor to the state and the governor on workforce issues. We are administratively attached to the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We're really excited to welcome the research team from the Strata Education Foundation, who will be sharing their insights on a groundbreaking project, which is the State Opportunity Index. So each state was evaluated on how well they are connecting their residents to good jobs. Today's session will focus specifically on Hawaii's profile, where we're making progress, where we face challenges, and what opportunities lie ahead. Although the research was released a few months ago, this is a great opportunity for us to dig deeper and clarify from the research team themselves what this data really means for our community and for Hawaii, this place we call home. So I want to thank Mark Rigdon, Senior Vice President of Government Relations at Strata, for collaborating with us to set up this webinar. First, we have the Vice President of Research, Dr. Nicole Torpe-Sabel. She leads the Foundation's research strategy on the State Opportunity Index and oversees the research team. Dave Clayton, Senior Vice President of Research, is also here. Dave Clayton is the Senior Vice President of Research at Strata Education Foundation. He leads the team focused on developing actionable insights to better connect education and economic opportunity. So without further ado, Nicole, Dr. Sabel, please let's welcome her and the team from Strata Foundation. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. And Mark, was there any other framing or opening that you wanted to give, or?
No, I just think that we'll acknowledge that in addition to Nicole and Dave, we'll have a couple other colleagues who will follow their summary of the Hawaii data from the State Opportunity Index and offer some insights on things that Hawaii might consider in response to what the data shows. So those folks will introduce themselves as they come online. Great, thanks, Nicole.
Yep. And it sounds like there was also a Teams invite. And so Dave said he was on Teams, but he's switching over, and there's a whole cohort of folks that are coming from the Teams invite over to the Zoom. So I think we'll see that group coming in now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Well, I will go ahead and start to share my slides, and what we'll do is walk through the findings of a project that Banette referred to. It's the State Opportunity Index, and we have a new version of it coming out in October. So we won't be able to share all of the updated findings, but we have a few insights on Hawaii from that new report that we'll also be able to refer to from time to time. So let me go ahead and pull this up. All right. Are you guys seeing the full screen, or do you see the partial? Full
Screen, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so where this kind of started off, Strata, we're a nonprofit foundation, and our mission is to, oh no, hold on. I'm sorry, bear with me. We've got, sometimes we have an issue where the deck auto advances, and I'm gonna just go ahead and try to fix that before we start, because it will drive us crazy if not. Okay, let me try this again. Sorry about that. Okay, are we back? Okay, great. So our mission is to connect education and opportunity. And so when we're thinking about higher education, one of the most basic ways we think about this is, are you better off because you went to higher education? That should be kind of our most basic promise to students, is that not only, we'll get you to college, we'll get you through college, but that college is a springboard to better opportunities in life. So one of the ways that we looked at this fundamental question was, what is the return on your investment for going to college? And are you better off? So when we look at the ROI of going to college, we are not looking at whether somebody is earning the most money that they possibly could, but rather what percent of graduates are earning enough that that premium over high school is enough to pay for their education. So this is kind of the most basic level of, we think this should be 100%. Every student who goes to college, who invests that time and money in college, should come out better off. And we see really a mix across all the states. You can see Hawaii there. This is a mix of, when we mix 2-year and 4-year, that about 63% of Hawaii graduates would end up with that positive ROI within 10 years. If we break it out between 4-year and 2-year, it's a bit stronger for the 4-year, but it's still only about 2/3. So we see that it's really mixed. 2/3 of students are getting that strong positive return. And the reason why it's important to look at this is because a lot of times when we think about ROI, or we look at ROI numbers, it's all about average. And so yes, of course, we know that on average, higher ed pays off, that you earn, say, $1 million more over your lifetime. But average doesn't cover all students. And we believe that's really important to address the success of every single student until we get to 100, to make sure that this promise is being fulfilled. So you can see kind of the mix across the states. Another thing that we would emphasize is that this is not a referendum on how higher education itself is doing all by itself, because a lot of the patterns we notice, they really have a lot to do with the kinds of opportunities, economic opportunities, that are available in a state. So you can't automatically get everyone great jobs if there aren't a lot of great jobs in the state. So this is really a partnership between higher ed, economic development, a lot of different players, to make sure that those opportunities are there for students. When we look at the 2-year results across the nation, it tends to be a lot more mixed, right? We see more consistent success for graduates from 4-year institutions, whereas at those 2-year institutions, some of them have very strong outcomes, but it's less consistent. And it depends really more on kind of what you study and what the demand is for those kinds of skills. So we don't want to get stuck in the sort of doom and gloom, we're failing or anything like that. But what we want to think about is, how do we improve? How do we make sure every student gets that positive experience, that positive return on their investment, access to opportunity? And so that's what this State Opportunity Index, it's focused on areas that will more tightly connect education and career to ensure that every student has that opportunity. So we're going to go through these 5 areas on a state-by-state basis. First one is quality coaching, talking about the kinds of advising and guidance that students get about their careers, work-based learning opportunities, and then these 3 bottom ones, the kind of foundation enablers that have to be in place to also make this whole system happen. So alignment with talent needs, employer needs in a state. Clear outcomes refers to data infrastructure to actually be able to track the outcomes of graduates. And then we have to have affordability, or the whole system is not accessible for the students that we're trying to serve. So we'll go through each of these. Dave and I will each share a little bit from each of these, and then we'll be happy to answer questions.
Hello, thank you for including us, and really for the long-term partnership. Nicole and I both are about turning the corner into our 8th year here at Strata, but I think Hawaii and your state have been one of our longest standing dedicated partnerships, even from the inception. We have learned a lot with you through time. And so a lot of what you're seeing come forward here are things that we've learned with you as we've tried to partner and learn alongside your efforts to help elevate the individuals in your communities and strengthen their opportunities. One thing that we found just so critically important, and is one of those 5 focus areas, is the guidance people receive about the fit between their talents and their interests and abilities, but how do they further develop those and harness them to meet their aspirations of an opportunity. And 2 to 1, the primary reason individuals give for pursuing education and training after high school is to improve, to get a good job, to pursue a career of interest, to have financial security and stability. And so this guidance is at the core of being very centered on those individuals and helping them. So we operationalize it. If you look at this 3 in the State Opportunity Index survey that Nicole again alluded to, we'll have, and thank you to your leaders and your community for participating, but we'll have data from 40 of the individual states in addition to national averages when we release the full report this October. But 3 things: the coaching or the guidance, the personalized guidance on the left side there. In the middle, the timely information. And this is very specific information, and the time frame that you're receiving it before the end of your first year of your education and training pursuits. But did you get information about the labor market outcomes? And even pushing down, do you know about the kind of jobs and earnings people who studied where you are a student and who studied the things you are studying? Do you get that level of specificity to be able to envision those paths and opportunities where you live, where you want to work, where you're studying? And then the support. The individuals, in addition to having a plan up front and having the information to inform and guide that plan, need the resources to overcome barriers or to grasp and seize opportunities that will help advance them. One of those opportunities we'll talk about next is work-based learning, the quality work-based learning experiences, but how do we serve those students? And so if we look at the survey results from the 2024 round, this is our inaugural survey, and there isn't data that tracks administrative data that tracks how many students have these experiences of guidance and timely information and support. So with a national survey of recent graduates, we were able to see that 2-year average of a quarter of students essentially say, I had all 3 of those things. 1 in 5 of the 4-year public, individuals who attended and graduated from a 4-year public university had those experiences. You can see with population centers, we were able to pilot in 4 states as building towards what now becomes 40 states this year. Nicole? What was nice about, we're moving to surveying current students and seniors. So that's what you'll see in 2025 in October. But in this inaugural report, we looked at those recent graduates from the classes of 2020 through 2023. And it allowed us to ask them both about their experiences with this education to career guidance and quality coaching, and about what's happened to them since graduation with regard to, are they in a job that requires their degree? You just saw, Nicole, some of that positive ROI, and one of the closest and strongest correlates between that 10-year positive ROI is if you have a job a college level job, college degree, college job. And so you see that increase in the report by individuals who had the guidance. Similarly, satisfaction, and then both with the job as well as towards career goals, it goes up meaningfully for those individuals. A few details as you look under the hood a little bit in what we saw last year, and again, more to come, but really strength in the support and in the personalized education and guidance. Right, that you think those 2 bookends that we had in that first slide. And then the opportunity is certainly in the middle with that labor market information that's personalized and tailored to place of study, economic region where you aspire to work. What are those connections, and how do students pursue and secure and fare after graduation as they go through the program? Also, your efforts to support that guidance through the educational partnerships and convenings and here we are, a part of this today. Thank you. And the career readiness initiatives that the system is pursuing. So activities that are underway, again, that we've observed and been close to and able to support in different ways with your community through time. But those are strengths, and as they emerge into this and what we're seeing nationally. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the next practice that we want to talk about is work-based learning. We've seen that be a real key in our research in terms of better career outcomes for students. So in our inaugural pilot report, this was a really simple metric. This was simply, did you have a paid internship? Did you have an internship where you paid? And that was the baseline that we asked about and rated states on, because that was where the most solid evidence base for better career outcomes was. And what we saw in that 2024 report was only about a quarter of students at four-year institutions, and then only about 1 in 10 students at two-year institutions were having that opportunity to have a paid internship. Now, the class of 2020 to 2023, you'll see, they had some tough circumstances during those years. Obviously, they were impacted by the COVID pandemic. So we are excited to see this year's results. We're not going to tell you what they are, but they're better. We're seeing improvement in terms of student experiences with having paid internships. We also have seen a big movement nationally to just ensure that interns are paid. So there were more students having these kinds of internships, but not as many being paid. And we're seeing more and more that students are being paid, which is a great sign. What we've also done for 2025, though, is expanded the types. Oops. Sorry, I forgot this slide was in here. This is just, again, showing the kinds of evidence that we've seen linking paid internships to better employment outcomes. So we saw that 73% of graduates who had had a paid internship said that their first job required a degree. It was only 62% if they had an unpaid internship, and only 44% if they didn't have an internship at all. And you can also see the similar kinds of correlations with those measures of if they were satisfied with their first job and if they felt like they were making progress toward their long-term career goals. In every case, the students who had a paid internship had better outcomes. And, unpaid internships, better than nothing, but not as strong as the paid internships. For 2025, we wanted to be more expansive in terms of what counted, because we know that there's a variety of models of work-based learning. Internships aren't for everyone, especially if you think about, say, nurses or teachers or certain maybe sciences. There's other models. So in this year's 2025 State Opportunity Index, we are counting paid internships, apprenticeships, paid co-op, paid practicum, or paid undergraduate research. There are other practices that we also ask about, but we're not ready to sort of count those in terms of rating states yet. They're a little bit more in the emerging evidence kind of space, things like micro internships, project-based learning, we think tremendously valuable in terms of curriculum, but we really did want to draw a kind of a line in the sand about pay. And so we're only going to count things that are paid because we know that that's so important for student access. So early insights here, we're seeing that, again, these are not exact that we're previewing because we're not supposed to do that, but only about 1 in 3 Hawaii seniors are having any of those kinds of paid quality work-based learning experiences. And then it's quite a bit lower for students enrolled at two-year institutions. So we do know that this is an area of a lot of focus and momentum for Hawaii, which is great. And so we look forward to continuing to follow your work on that and, hopefully see these numbers continue to track up over the coming years. We see that, you've been working on certain pathways for hospitality, for looking at, experiential learning directly tied to high demand sectors. So we're excited to be able to support that kind of work.
Nicole,
Speaking of,
there's a report released last month now, but a couple of weeks ago, focusing on the work-based learning from a student perspective.
Yep.
It's really interesting. We learned a couple things. One, we asked them about, what they benefited from and where it came. And so we will make sure you have that report. But it was very interesting that the technical skill development, their perception that they developed technical skills was highly correlated with their perceived career value of that work-based learning experience, as well as their social capital that they developed. Those were the two things that were the strongest relationship to their perceived benefits from the internship. And as Nicole showed you that sort of list of things that we're counting as quality work-based learning, and then other projects, other experiences that were not fully as immersive, you do see those differences in the skill development and in the social capital development associated with those that bucket of 5 things. But even as you work in those other projects, that report may be helpful to you, either support the efforts you're making or perhaps to inform additional refinements of what students are seeking. That's not always the same as what employers are seeking or need, but as you take into account the student perspective, it's a nice report Nicole has just published. On employer alignment, Nicole said it at the top of this meeting, right? That sometimes when we're in a higher education setting, it's easy to feel like this is an evaluation of the students. But so much is dependent upon the labor market returns and recognition and opportunities where those students are going to live and work after their education. Throughout and across our body of work with looking at alumni satisfaction across 4 and 2 years, they are very appreciative of the academic quality and preparation. That's like the minimum. It needs to happen. But these recent graduates see great strength in their academic coursework and faculty and staff. The variability of the variation is the degree to which that's tied and aligned with career opportunities, career preparation, and developing skills that are relevant. So when the employer alignment, again, even looking at your initiatives, as Nicole said, how do we look at that balance between what the academy is providing and education and training providers and what the local and regional and state economies need? And that's what this is intended to do, is identify that mutuality between education, training, economic development, and workforce, and how well are they fitting together. So it's a new effort to try and measure and understand this. And we've been learning a lot through the process, and you'll probably help us continue to refine as you think about your context. But if we look at the next slide, there are 2 components to this. Again, from that student perspective, what percentage of college graduates are in a college job, college degree, college job? How well is that working in a state? And then we've picked, and this is probably the most important thing you could do on this slide, is look at the footnote, which seems counterintuitive. Maybe you put the important stuff in the headline. But these opportunity jobs, we're looking at the supply-demand gap between the graduates of the education training systems, institutions in Hawaii, and the posted jobs for early career, job postings for early career hires, 3 years experience or less in these specific fields, right? Cybersecurity, data analytics, finance and accounting support, software, healthcare technicians, nursing, engineering, manufacturing technicians, and technologies. That may not be the exact same list of high opportunity jobs that exists in your state. There's some intersection. This represents about 1/3 of all entry-level job postings nationally. Again, but each state is unique with their economy and then where those opportunities are. So you'll benefit from using your own analyses and labor market to look at supply demand, but this is looking at all states across that kind of common basket of jobs that nationally have a high demand for hiring and that pay good wages and have opportunities for advancement. So a little preamble context there, but as you see what this looks like in last year's analyses, you'll see this, first of all, individuals ages 26 to 30 who have a bachelor's degree, but not additional graduate or professional education, what percentage of them are employed in a college level job? And here's where Nicole highlighted in that first ROI, Hawaii at 43% is really the lowest in the nation in terms of that percentage of college graduates with college jobs that are classified as a college job. And so you think you've got some talent there of individuals with credentials and degrees. How do you use that talent to develop your economy and to pull in more, create opportunities for them, but also create the growth and the advancement and development be a key question where you sit. Nobody is like nailing it, right? You look at the highest and strongest states, and it's still less than 2/3 of those graduates. And then if we look at the employer side of things, this supply-demand ratio, here's where you see actually Hawaii kind of in the middle of the pack, right? The 51% ratio of the graduates from your institutions being able to meet the number of postings for those jobs. And so there's a little bit more equilibrium between supply and demand there, which you have here in Virginia and Washington, D.C., we worry about their regional leaders worry about migration of talent. And like they have no idea what migration of talent means, right? As you think where you are and the barriers to both attracting talent and retaining and losing talent, and a whole different set of challenges that you face in your state. When you put these together and average them, you see that Hawaii comes out as foundational, on a par with other states. You can see where either the college level employment or the supply demand gaps, that balance or average overall. No state is leading, but you start to think about where can we look to learn and what's happening in different places. Sometimes, as Nicole often reminds me, the supply demand can be a good fit, but it might be because there's not a lot of demand, right? And so that balance between what you're producing and developing in those pipelines and where people go is really important. Just a little bit of detail that you can see on this next slide of supply relative to demand in 3 specific of those occupations that we looked at: the data analytics, software development, cybersecurity. When you look at the opportunities, that second bullet point in terms of the supply demand ratio, relatively weaker supply of engineering, the finance and accounting professions, healthcare technicians, and nursing. I don't think any of this surprises you, but hopefully it helps to see that in this analysis and context. So thanks, Nicole.
Great. So, one thing I did forget to mention, should have mentioned it in the work-based learning, but it's also sort of tied to this employer alignment, where Hawaii is actually first in the nation, is in apprenticeships. So I did neglect to mention that. A lot of these metrics right now are a little more higher ed focused, but we do see that Hawaii, at least relative to the size of its labor force, is really utilizing apprenticeships at a level that's higher than any other state. So that'll be somewhere where, we'll probably point other states to learn from what Hawaii is doing there.
And Nicole, though, that information will be included in the October 2025 report. So that's a kind of growth and development that you'll expect to see yourselves there and recognize for that strength.
Yep, that's right. All right. So another kind of foundational criteria that needs to be in place in order to more tightly connect education and opportunity is really to have a clear picture about what's going on with your graduates. And this is, so we've assessed states on 10 different elements of their state data systems. We look at what do they collect, how are those data integrated across post-secondary ed, high school, across states, how are those data provided to researchers, to the public, and then how are they used? Are they actually being acted upon by policymakers, or are they having an impact? And here, Hawaii is actually one of the strongest states. So you'll see Hawaii is advanced on this categorization of education to employment data systems. And my colleague Dana is going to be able to, actually, no. She provided me with the background on Hawaii's strengths there. And then my colleague Andrew is actually going to be able to speak to a couple of these elements in more depth on enhanced wage records. So if we kind of break this down into the different types of, the different elements for data infrastructure, we see that Hawaii is leading when it comes to non-degree and non-credit data, that enhanced wage records are an area of opportunity where Strata is making a big push and encouraging a lot of states trying to give technical assistance on how to do this. Andrew will speak more to this. You can see advanced in a lot of these connecting the data across these various systems, providing the data. Researcher access, Hawaii is one of the strongest that we see across the country. They have a really clear process for access. They publish a research agenda so that any researchers who are using the data can provide insights that are relevant and helpful, and then really great data security. So that's a good highlight for Hawaii. And then a few other places where, so you also see on that last one, dedicated insights capacity, again, using the data well in order to inform policy. That's a great opportunity and a good bedrock to build into some of these other areas when you have that data foundation. All right.
Well, if you get to all of this and you get good guidance and you have good alignment and you see a path forward and you have aligned economic development strategies and workforce needs and recruitment, then you come to this issue that is so often a barrier for individuals when they talk about their choices and even their ability to persist, is the affordability. So we're working to help states and systems and institutions think about strategies to ensure affordability. And we also see this affordability as just a key piece in the broader public trust and people's perception of the value of pursuing education and training after high school and it leading somewhere. I think all of this is designed to work together, to Nicole's end, to improve that positive ROI and the connection between education and opportunity for individuals. Our belief is that when individuals find those opportunities and succeed, that leads to their households that are strengthened, communities where they work and live that are strengthened, regional economies, et cetera. So doing right by them at the center of those investments we make in their human potential and the ability to develop. So we've tried, there's so much work that's been done on affordability through the years, right? It's an immersive field. We've tried to do something that is student-centered to allow people to look at what would we be expecting of students if they needed to work their way through an education. What kind of a burden or ask are we making of an individual and or a family in some cases? So looking at public institutions only and looking at in-state resident tuition at public institutions, we calculated a weighted average for every state that is the average net price for an in-state resident to attend a public institution. You take the sort of published, the schools report this, their cost of attendance and the grant, scholarship, and net aid. So we're taking data that is self-reported that they put forward. And then we're calculating the net price. And then what the Census Bureau does is it provides, there's a category in there where you can see what is the median wage for full-time students who are working part-time. So you can look at that in each state and understand, okay, this is what in Hawaii or Nebraska or South Dakota or Virginia, a part-time student, full-time student, part-time worker is making on an hourly basis. And we just did some division. We assumed that if somebody works 40 hours a week during the summer and then works, part-time or full-time while enrolled over those 30 weeks of 2 semesters, how many hours would they need to work to break even and cover that net price on an annual basis? So that's what this is looking at. The green, a couple states in the green are states where the intersection between the student wage and that net price mean that a student could work the full 40 week, the full time in the summer, and then 10 hours a week during those 30 weeks of being enrolled as a student and meet their cost. On the foundational side, where you see those red states, that means full time in the summer and 30 hours a week or more during the semester to be able to break even. If you're able to do that. Hawaii advanced on average. This is rolling together both 4-year and the 2-year. If we look at the next, you see that in the 4-year affordability in Hawaii, based on the part-time wage for a full-time student and the public, tuition and net price, 20 to 30 hours of work a week. The research literature shows that after 20 hours a week of work, you start to see some negative impact on academic progress, on grades, on course load, on ability to persist semester to semester. So that threshold of 20 hours a week is one we look to cross over to an advanced level. If you look at the 2 years, you'll see again the overall economics, right, are much more favorable to students who are choosing to work their way, and this is assuming, right, this takes away a lot of things, but in this formula. And then Anna, good question in terms of other costs of living. That cost of attendance includes that the schools are reporting what's the cost of housing, transportation, food, livelihood, books. All of that is wrapped into what a school is reporting in to the U.S., to the federal government in that regard. So those are accounted for in that regard. Nicole, anything you want to add?
I mean, you can see overall the trends, right? Almost no state is doing well at the 4-year level, very few. You've got a few, California, Washington, Alaska, Florida, New York, and then most states are doing much better for the 2-year students. But then we remember on the ROI slide, so just because it's more affordable to attend a 2-year institution doesn't mean that those ultimate outcomes make it worth it still, because if the jobs aren't there with an earnings premium, we still don't necessarily see positive ROI for those students. So we have to think about, how to ensure that those 2-year degrees are connected to good jobs and how to make those 4-year degrees more affordable.
Yeah. And that's where most conversations go as you get into working sessions with states and groups and institutions, is on those associate degrees, the general associate degree, associate arts degree, as opposed to something aligned with a skilled, a career path that translates more directly to professional opportunity, better labor market returns, right? So in that space. Low cost for the 2-year, we emphasize that. Relatively low cost. This is something that'll be new in this year's report. In addition to the overall, Nicole was able to do the look at the data and the calculations with our team for low income families, and what are we expecting? Is it the differential expectations relative to income? So that's a strength for Hawaii's investments there. Another thing we put in this year under opportunities is the second bullet point. Sometimes it's hard to think about new money and additional merit need-based aid and ways to hold costs down. But the on-time completion rates, we see a number of states where if you think about graduating and the percentage of students that graduate from a 4-year institution in 4 years instead of 6 years or 8 years, and the affordability benefits that come there. So completion rates would be another place where Hawaii would have opportunities to strengthen their, categorization or their progress towards affordability for students. Yeah.
All right. I think yep. Thanks for bearing with us. I know that's a lot of slides, but we're happy to answer any questions or talk about, what's coming with the new report, anything that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Nicole and Dave, for a very insightful presentation. My takeaway, and perhaps because I was trying to take notes, is that we're leading the way for data gathering, but really at the bottom of the pile when it comes to alignment between education and economic development. Because in fact, that's what brought me here, in a sense that when we found out that underemployment, the data is so compelling that 5 years after their college or for graduation, college graduates are still 5 years after graduation are still not in, or are still in a job that does not require a college degree. That is something that gives us pause. So I wanted to maybe have you, Dave, or Nicole, elaborate on that particularly. What are some strategies that you think we could better align the business opportunities with the college completion?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we invite, Nicole, please respond, and then let's maybe invite Andrew to
I
jump
was
in.
actually just exactly what I was gonna do. Is our colleague Andrew Hansen is the author of the report you may be referring to called Talent Disrupted, that was really focused on underemployment, and now he's part of our employer alignment team. So I think Andrew, maybe if you would have some insights into those strategies.
And Andrew, while you're getting your 3 best talking points, I'll just say, I think Hawaii is leading the way in more than what you just articulated. I think the commitment to integration and understanding and measurement we've had multiple grants and grantees as a part of national cohorts, as well as working specifically in your state. And that commitment to improvement and progress and innovation, there are other challenges in each state's context, but that goodwill and what we're seeing here today, the commitment and the professional efforts are strong and are leading in many ways. So don't sell yourselves short in that way as you think about measuring sticks. But if you look at where you were a decade ago and where you are now and where you're headed, I think leading in those regards. So thank you. And Andrew, sorry, I'll let you take the floor.
Sure, yeah, delighted to have the opportunity to share a little bit of our thinking on that question. And then I'll also mention that Mark's asked me to present on two ideas that we're working to advance here at Strata. But I'll say, what we found in that same study, probably the most relevant and compelling solution that we have is to expand access to paid internships, which is part of this conversation as well. We found that when students had any kind of internship, actually, because we weren't able to differentiate between paid and unpaid in the study, but when they had any type of internship, their odds of becoming underemployed were cut in half. Just to invert that, their odds of getting a college level job increased by 50%. So just a really huge effect on that. That's controlling, for different aspects of the student experience, such as their major and their demographic characteristics and the like. So I mentioned that first. A few of the other things that we think about, number one, from a state perspective, is to actually measure, figure out ways to measure whether students have college level jobs in your state, at your state institutions. That's actually really not done. That's not something that's included in the college scorecard. And one of the solutions that I'm going to present would enable you to be able to do that, to collect occupational information so you know not only what your graduates and programs are earning, but also what kind of jobs that they're doing. So that's part of the solution set. Certainly, we think coaching and guidance is a big part of it. What we found in the data is that for students who are enrolled in more quantitative programs, we're far less likely to be underemployed. We've got a study underway currently to dig deeper into that on a sort of course taking level. So if you take more quantitative courses or you get a minor or a certificate in something quantitative, to what extent does that influence your probability of getting a college level job? And then the last thing I will say is that we're thinking about is for those programs that typically have very high rates of college level employment. You think about nursing, engineering, computer science, most frequently, certainly skilled trades in many respects. Many of them are more costly for institutions to deliver. And for that and other reasons, a lot of institutions don't have the capacity to enroll as many students as the labor market wants. And so thinking through strategies to expand access to those high demand pathways, we think is also a big part of the solution set. In terms of how you go about that, there's a lot of different levers that you can pull, and it very much depends on your state context. But those are kind of the four things that we think about and suggested in the paper.
We'll be calling on you, Andrew, for more additional details, because the devil will be in the details, as you can well imagine. So there's several questions on the chat, and one of which is about AI. Would you be able to respond to that, or someone else in your team? The question from Thomas is, hang on a second. How will AI affect the 5-year employment outlook for opportunity jobs, if at all? And Nicole partly responded to that. Are there any other insights that someone from your team can share?
Nicole, you speak to it. We've been seeing it consistently, and Andrew viewed out, but even just in the national press and the national things, it's been a hard year on, entry level recent graduates nationally in the labor market, and particularly in the tech sectors, which everybody's pushed toward. And then you see this softening, and then furthermore, the AI implications. So how do you catch up to that, and what do those skills translate into in an economy that adjusts to an emerging technology, that those problem-solving skills, and Nicole, maybe speak to your, anyway, what you've seen in the analysis, but also the research we've seen, Andrew and Nicole, on the profile of skills that help people succeed and be flexible.
Sure. I mean, I think we've seen a mix of technical and, sometimes they're called soft skills, durable skills, that kind of problem solving, creative thinking, critical thinking. So it's really hard, as Dave was saying, it's all of us are trying to figure this out. We don't have a crystal ball. We've seen some of the industries that have been impacted the most are probably the tech sector, software development, coding, that kind of thing. And less so in services, things like teaching or nursing. Those jobs aren't getting replaced at this point, but it's really hard to know. And I think that's where the importance of those employer partnerships comes in. It's just trying to keep those lines of communication open with the institutions of higher education, so they can continue to provide this kind of baseline, really flexible skills, and then figure out what the new technical skills are going to be. But Bennett, I'd be interested in the impacts that you all are seeing, on jobs and demand for different kinds of talent in Hawaii.
In terms of AI,
Yeah.
that's actually an issue that WDC is hoping to analyze. So we're trying to dedicate some resources to do a study on it, because I think the impact of AI on Hawaii, which is a very insular type of economic universe, that may very well be more impactful than other places. We have a question from Rosella, who is the local board chair for the Big Island. Go ahead, Rosella.
Hi there. Thank you, everyone. 2 observations. So with AI, for Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken, is the most unionized state in the nation. Therefore, AI, a lot of our collective bargaining agreements disallow those technology advancements. So for the most part, those of us that are in a unionized work environment, I believe, have less of a threat when it comes to AI than those that are not. Second observation is what I am seeing, and perhaps the data hasn't caught up yet, is with the big, beautiful bill. Because there is not a tax or on tips or what have you, we are seeing managers who do have a college degree and directors move out of those positions to go into those tipping category positions because they will make more money, a lot more money. So just a couple of things I wanted to share with the group, given I am in the service industry and I'm seeing this in real time. So hopefully those observations are helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosella. One of our council members is also here on the call. Cheryl Cross, would you like to ask your question at this time?
You bet. Sorry, I'm in my car. Thank you so much for this, Strata. You've been such a great partner to the state. I've always enjoyed your data and everything you produce. I have a question regarding I'm going to call them bridge programs, but immersive internships. You spoke to this data. I'm curious, we're always trying to capture at the Workforce Development Council, trying to figure out who is doing this. We know that the big players for our state are our skilled trades. So we would say that would be Pearl Harbor Shipyard, the Stevedore program. But I'm not certain that that's the information you're capturing. So can you elucidate us and give us a better vector of the data that you pulled and where you were pulling it from? Now, I know that there are the big 4 that are here in Hawaii, and I'm talking about the large accounting firms. They have immersive or paid internship programs. I'm just trying to figure out where you were heading with that and where you were pulling your data. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Cheryl. We didn't really get into that as much as we should have. So it's survey data, and we survey students directly. We ask seniors. Well, the first year we asked recent graduates about their experience, and then this year we're asking seniors at the four-year institutions or just any student who's enrolled at two-year institutions. And nationally, we have 56,000 responses. So about 2/3 of those are at the four-year level and a third at the two-year level. So there really aren't good comprehensive other sources of data. As you say, you sort of have to know where to go and try to pull it from a lot of different places. So our feeling was that the most consistent way to measure state to state was to simply ask students, but then we don't necessarily have the information on which company they interned at. I don't believe that was something that we asked this time. We've asked some questions about industry, but it's good for us to know what kinds of information are helpful, so that way when we're designing our surveys, we can make sure to capture that.
Sure. I appreciate that. If there is an opportunity to do follow on as you create your questionnaires, and I know you're doing national and then boiling it back to state by state by state.
Yeah.
But if there's something we can do, because we are geographically challenged, we are isolated, if there's something special that we could look at, we would certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Cheryl, thank you. Nicole, we'll follow up with Cheryl. I think we're just getting through these survey results, and we have, again, when states like yours participate fully, it allows us to have data, and that can allow for follow-up and exploratory analyses in partnership with the data we already have, and then think about what, as we hear from different states, what would be valuable additions to, or topics, from year to year. Some things stay the same, other things will change to explore. So that would be very beneficial for us to come back and engage with you as we turn the corner in getting this report finalized.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, so I have one. You talked about the ROI impact, and when you look at Hawaii, and I think Anna alluded to it, how we have high costs of living, and I'm sure it dampens the ROI. Is there anything we can do to improve that ROI, especially on the neighbor islands? And it cannot be just raising the living wage, because as we had a chief economist of the state who made a presentation, and he said there's unintended consequences when you do that. Of course, the cost of doing business increases, and that also has a very significant impact on the economy. So is there anything that other states have practiced that would improve the ROI, other than living with the reality, of course, that Hawaii has a high cost of living?
Andrew, do you want to speak to that? Or Crystal, perhaps?
Not sure any of us has a great answer, to be honest, Bennett. I think we're still learning. And this is our second year of doing this study. So our hope is that as we continue to see the trends, we'll be able to see more of the linkage. As we said, having a college level job is very strongly correlated then, but that's sort of a chicken and egg thing, right? So how do you get everyone a college level job? How do you, create those opportunities? Mark, yeah, you've been looking across the states. Anything you would want to add?
Well, I don't think I have a great answer on that specific issue either. I think other states with high costs of living are struggling with this too. So I think over time, hopefully, we'll begin to see some strategies for trying to deal with that a little bit more effectively. Obviously, in the context of the One Big Beautiful Bill and its impact on state budgets, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult from a resource perspective in the short to medium term. But we do have a couple of colleagues who could offer some additional suggestions about things that Hawaii might consider that fall under the rubric of our sort of 5 areas of focus. So if there aren't other questions, maybe we could turn to Andrew Hansen and then my colleague or our colleague Crystal Collins. But yeah, go ahead.
Before we do that, I know Erica has a question. Erica, do you want to ask your question? And then we'll turn to you because we have some time, Mark. Go ahead, Erica.
Sorry, this is possibly an elementary question. I'm one of those people who's not a math person. I am chagrined about it. But I just wanted to ask a clarifying question about the supply demand. So I think in the supply chart, we were saying we have an oversupply of qualified college graduates who aren't finding jobs. But then on the second slide about the demand, Hawaii had about 50% of employers saying that they were readily able to find people to fill the positions that they're looking for. So actually, if we had a pure oversupply, where's that mismatch coming from? Is it that people are getting degrees that aren't in demand jobs and therefore the oversupply is coming from underwater basket weaving majors? Or sorry if I
I
could
wouldn't
just
no, that's great. I wouldn't comment on the majors, but I would say yes, your interpretation is right. You see people with college degrees who are not getting college level jobs, and you see employers who say we have these jobs for college graduates that we can't fill and we don't have the right. So it's a mismatch between the kinds of
got it.
skills that are needed and the kinds of jobs that are available.
Now, it
Okay,
may
so
also, you've already highlighted maybe a mismatch in incentives. If you can go make more money in a tipping hospitality setting, that you'd say, or the majority of people in that have college degrees, how relevant is that degree? So that's the other part of it to think about. But that was better than Erica, better than those of us who do a lot of math could have summarized that.
Well, I think what's top of mind for me is the recent changes to the Pell Grants or the federal loans to some of the associate programs where we're looking at needing to prove the value. But in Hawaii specifically, on that list of degrees, there's like 6 early education programs where we have a constant labor shortage. So I'm a little bit worried about this mismatch where we're saying there isn't a need, but in fact there's a dire need, and the market just isn't paying the right rate for it. So.
That's exactly right. And that goes to Nicole's anchor point of some of this is labor market bias and what we've decided as a culture and a society to value and compensate. And so sometimes you have to look at those policy fixes for early childhood, for teachers, for like nurses. And that's part of why we pushed on paid student teaching and paid clinical practicum to become a nurse, that these socially high social need, but not high compensated, putting extra burdens on individuals to finance that without the earnings on the backside are so challenging.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dave. So let's go to Vanji and then Thomas. So Vanji, the question that she posed is about immersive internship. If you can define that a little bit more, and also about micro internships. What do you refer to those?
Yes. Okay. So immersive isn't a term that we have used, but if we're thinking broadly about quality, kind of what Dave was referring to earlier and the link that Mark put in the chat, we did take a look at the kinds of experiences that people are having in work-based learning. And the 2 keys that really stood out to us were, of course, developing technical skills. So not just making copies, but actually learning to do the work in the job that you're interning, but then also building relationships. So that was an area where sometimes some of those other experiences that might be solely on campus, students could be building skills, but not necessarily having the benefit of building their professional network and making connections and relationships that are going to allow them to more easily get that first job after they graduate. So I think the combination of technical skills and professional relationships are what we've seen as keys to quality. And then micro internships, this is a new kind of model where it's almost kind of like a project or something that we'll see an employer. Some of these are through platforms like Parker Dewey or Ripen. They'll put out just a very time limited project. I think we generally say if it's less than 40 hours total, then it's more of a micro internship rather than say an internship that goes across the summer or the semester or something like that. So those we're still studying if they are kind of a way for students to start getting their foot in the door and start getting experience, but alone are probably not enough to see the kinds of benefits. But, are they a first step and then they allow students to get their next work-based learning experience, something like that?
Just a follow-up question before we go to Thomas. So Nicole, have you seen states that have actually set aside resources, whether it be public sector resources, to be able to support internship initiatives. So for instance, the state of Hawaii actually started with a Hele Imua program. And from the public sector, the agencies that we've been focused on, we're now pivoting to private sector as well, using those funds for that. There was a bill at the legislature that just passed. So for those states that are advanced in the internship realm, what are they and what are they doing right?
Yeah. And we'll have a couple of, along with the report, another thing that's coming out this year is we'll have action profiles of states that are doing things that we think other states should learn from. So look out for that when the report gets published. There'll be, in fact, Crystal and Andrew both wrote some of these, so those will be great. But I was wondering, Mark, if, with your work across the states, thinking about who has been supporting or, funding internships, would you have any kind of comment or insights into what you've seen across the different states?
Sure. I think the state that I would talk about initially is Virginia, which has made a stated commitment that every undergraduate should have some kind of work-based learning experience. And so they are building out and investing in sort of the infrastructure, both at the university level and across the intermediaries that can help build the bridge between employers and students to begin to try and scale that. And they've invested some money in helping to both increase the visibility of these kinds of opportunities and the state's commitment, while also trying to provide some wage subsidies particularly for medium to small employers who might not necessarily opt to offer a paid internship. And I think there are a number of other states. Georgia recently just passed a bill this session that's part of their effort to become the top state for talent bill. And so they are requiring some kind of work-based learning experience. And I think, as Nicole alluded to, there's sort of an expanding spectrum of what constitutes work-based learning that is, sort of in addition to paid internships and apprenticeships that include other kinds of micro internships. Colorado just passed a piece of legislation that's going to create opportunities for the higher education system there to integrate much more sort of applied case-based learning opportunities that are directly come out of sort of local economic sector case studies into their curricula. So there are a variety of ways that states are trying to address and scale opportunities that will create some of the kinds of benefits that our research is pointing to.
Yeah, I think intuitively we know that internships lead to good jobs, but I think the data now emphasizes it and puts a point to it, a dot to it. So, let's go to Thomas. Thomas, go ahead and ask
Hi.
your question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. And this is more of a anecdotal point to Erica's question, as well as the question to Strata. So Erica, one of the gaps that we're seeing from the construction side, and we see a lot of construction growing with the current administration, as well as with a lot of infrastructure phasing out, the construction industry pays very well for project engineers who need CAD, BIM, Revit, so 3D modeling engineering skills. And we posted several interns, I think almost 4 now, who on the resumes say that they have those type of classes that they've taken. But when I've interviewed them and worked with them and tried to get them familiar and working with our senior CAD developers and engineers, we find out that, it was a semester. And even then, in that semester, it's in a computer lab, which that means they're only getting exposure maybe a couple hours every week. So that may be one of the reasons for the gap that we see of, hey, we have this oversupply of students, but then we also have employers who say, we can't find the right candidate. That's some of the qualitative aspects. And was wondering, this is kind of my transition into Strata. In your surveys with them, do you go into depth or do you have any data that is similar to this anecdotal experience that we've had across states or whatnot, where we have in the scenario of the oversupply of students, but then that gap between the desired skills and whatnot. Because kind of from the construction world, we pay 70 to 90K for a project engineer, and sometimes if they are really, really skilled, low hundreds, right? But we're finding that even when we give these internships and whatnot, that there is this big gap. And Hawaii is unique, right? We have a lot of talent bleed to other states, because if you're really good at those skill sets, you can go get a really good global construction job elsewhere.
Yeah, I'd say we don't have survey data specifically on that, but it's definitely something that we've heard time and time again from any kind of, a lot of the national organizations that sit on our advisory groups as well, that we need to think not just about degrees, but about skills, because just saying you have a bachelor's degree in such and such doesn't mean that you actually have the aligned skills. And that's the next really tricky thing to measure. And as you point out, even if you say on your resume that you have these aligned skills, how do you prove that you actually do and that you have them in the depth, and the ways to apply them in that actual employer setting is tricky.
Thank you, Tom. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, noting that often small and medium-sized businesses have a harder time articulating a standard skill profile that they need. We need qualified workers, but what does that mean? And so, Thomas, what you just did in that specificity of here are the things that are clear, the opportunities you all have to have those dialogues between the education and training providers, and you don't even have to change a program or credit hours or create new courses. Some of those things can really be points of emphasis within, and places where employers can step in and say, we can give you the 3 types of exercises you should use your time with, and we can fund extra computer lab workstation, those types of things that will help, especially the small. And the big 4 accounting, they've got their thing and they know what they're doing, but on these other talent pipelines and development, Andrew will help us think about that. But those are where we've seen promising efforts and where we've seen tremendous value in intermediaries that bring those regional and state kind of dialogues to life in ways that go beyond a couple leaders who connect and agree, and this would be great, but to create some depth and some sustainability to those partnerships is wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Just wanted to do a shout out to Senator Sharon Moriwaki, who has joined us. I know there was a question about wage records, and Matt, that's a very good point. And if you can elaborate on that, because I think that data is so important, particularly as we try to match good jobs with the economic development that's going on in our state. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, yeah. I know, and I'd love to hear the Strata team talk a little bit more about just how wage records can be enhanced in other states. I know off the top of my head, being able to understand not just the wages people are making, right, but what occupation they're in, because that's a really important piece, right, to being able to understand a lot of this. Especially, I really like the point you made, Nicole, that with these averages, right, that doesn't say really the opportunities that everybody's getting, right? And so I think that visibility, right, into those enhanced wage records that really allow us to understand graduates and on different islands, going into different industries with different degrees, who's having success, right? And as we're growing our economy, to me, it seems that the quicker we can see kind of those emerging and bright spots and provide learners with that information, that's really how we can know what those opportunities are and make sure we're socializing them.
I think that's a setup for my colleague, Andrew.
Yeah, Matt, thank you so much for teeing me up here, because that's the next part of what we wanted to present to you today. So thanks everybody for this really engaging conversation. I think what we wanted to do is at least highlight one. We had a couple, but I think we only have time to present one of the solutions that we're really thinking about here at Strata that we think has the potential to move Hawaii and our nation closer to a future where every person, sort of no matter where they start, can get ahead, get a quality education, a fulfilling career. So the one that we want to talk about was actually what you call enhanced wage records. Sometimes we used to use the term enhancing employment data. We think this is one of the most impactful steps that you could take to strengthen the connection between education and opportunity. And perhaps one of my colleagues can put it in the chat, but we published a brief a couple months ago at the beginning of June, where we tried to make the tightest, sort of most compelling case for why states should do this, and highlighted the fact that despite investing a lot of resources, states really often can't answer many of the basic questions about the employment outcomes of their education programs. At the same time, just by making a few what we think is simple enhancements to the employment data that you're already collecting, you can give stakeholders, whether it's policymakers, educators, employers, or individuals and their families, the insights that they need to make better decisions. So here are some of the examples of the kinds of questions that enhancing your employment data would enable you to answer. So what kinds of jobs are people who complete education programs employed in? That's the one I made reference to earlier. Where are the people who complete the program working in the state specifically, whether it's the county or the region or what have you? What is a typical completer's hourly wage or salary? It's probably surprising that we can't answer that. Does that wage or salary enable them to be self-sufficient? Are the education programs or targeted workforce funds that you may have delivering the intended benefits for individuals and for the public? So if the program's designed to produce more graduates into tech jobs, do those graduates actually get tech jobs? We already mentioned to what extent are employers offering internships and apprenticeships, that we don't really have great data sources on those. Enhanced employment data would certainly be a solution for that. And then what's the relative level of supply and demand for different kinds of talent? Does the state need more or fewer nursing, STEM, humanities, business graduates, for example, et cetera? And then which first jobs post-completion lead to career advancement, and which ones do not, which ones are more dead ends? So as I say, the good news is that you can answer all of these questions and more by enhancing your employment data. And there are 4 enhancements that you see on the left that we think are critical. So the first is occupation, whether it's your job title or your SOC, standard occupational classification, which answers, what kind of job do you have? The pay rate, which is typically either hourly wage or hours worked. So how much are you earning, usually on an hourly basis? Location, where are you working geographically? And worker type. So are you a regular employee? Are you an intern, an apprentice, or something else? And I saw there's a question about gig work in here as well. And so this is something trying to make sense of the kinds of work that people are doing. That's top of mind for folks. And I see we think this is really broad benefits across multiple stakeholders. So to make that a little bit more tangible, what we did in the brief was pulled together a series of hypothetical analyses and charts that reflect what you in Hawaii and other states typically know now, and then what you could know with enhanced employment data. So, not only how much graduates earn, as I said, but also their career pathways. So if you take a hypothetical psychology program, let's say at Jane Doe University, for example, in Hawaii, you know how much a graduate of that program earned in the previous quarter, and you could use that to estimate or calculate their annual earnings. In this case, let's say it's $48,000 a year. If you had enhanced data, you could also determine the kinds of jobs that those graduates were employed in, and then how much those graduates earn in those respective fields. So let's say 25% were HR specialists earning $65,000, while 28% are working in office admin earning $38,000 a year. Like I said, you could not only determine whether a graduate worked in the state, but also where they work specifically. So in Hawaii, you know that, say, 82% of site graduates are working in the state. If you had enhanced data, you'd also know whether they moved to a different county, or whether they weren't captured in the state's employment data system. And as I say, you'd be able to pinpoint exactly which county they're working in, so you have a thorough understanding of where the graduates or completers of a given program are getting jobs, as well as, from the county or region's perspective, where you're sourcing talent. We mentioned college level employment, which is a metric that we use in our state opportunity index. This is something you'd be able to calculate for every program, whether it's an education or training program. You'd be able to calculate, are the folks getting jobs and occupations that are appropriate for that level of education. As I mentioned, which jobs post completion are springboards to economic mobility, which ones are dead ends. So you might learn that basically anybody who becomes a financial analyst, 99% of financial analysts advance in their careers, as opposed to 1 in 4 admin assistants, let's say. And then if you had a targeted fund for education and training, let's say it's for tech or healthcare, right now you could calculate how much that person who benefits from that program earns. If you had enhanced data, you could calculate how many people got hired in those target occupations as a result of the program, and then also have a handle on their actual wage or salary. How many students have work-based learning? Many of us, as we've been discussing earlier, are working to expand access to work-based learning, whether it's internships, apprenticeships, etc. But you likely know very little about who has access to work-based learning right now. That's something that enhanced employment data could solve for. And then I would say a major limitation is probably relevant for you, that a lot of states experience as they look at their unemployment insurance wage record data, and they typically know that graduates' earnings are low, or whatever relevant groups their earnings are low, but they don't know whether it's because their wage or salary is low, or because they didn't work full time for a full quarter. With enhanced data, they could have a way more sophisticated understanding of what's driving those low earnings, if it's actually because they have a low wage or salary, or if it's because they worked part of a quarter or are working part-time. A common issue that comes up in these conversations is this going to be a burden for employers? And it's definitely true that employers have to report additional data, and very important if you were to enhance your employment data to effectively engage the employer community. But at the same time, in practice, most employers already track all of these things in their HR platforms like Workday or ADP. And with electronic reporting, which you have, the setup tends to be very manageable. There's also organizations like the U.S. Chamber Foundation who are working to help states streamline and standardize and automate a lot of this to make the burden even less than that. So, absolutely take employer concerns over this seriously. But like I said, most employers already collect this data, and the states who are leading on this have shown that integration is feasible and scalable, and when it's done thoughtfully. We've been seeing growing momentum in states on this. This is why we're so excited about it. Many of these states are recognizing if they're able to enhance these employment data, it gives them a competitive edge. It helps them understand the relationship between education and employment in their state way better than they ever have. Just a couple examples: West Virginia and South Carolina, 2 states who have had remarkable success within the past several years at doing this, and certainly have provided a model that other states can learn from. So let me, just in the interest of time, let me stop there and see if there's any interest in discussion or questions around this topic.
Andrew, I have a question.
Yeah.
For West Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, I can't remember, but were they codified in legislative bills? Is that what happened?
In South Carolina, yes. Well, actually, let me ask Mark to answer that full question.
Yeah.
That's his area of expertise.
Not every state has to do it through legislation. For example, Tennessee's doing it through administrative rule changes in the Department of Labor. But most states do take legislative action to make these changes. And in addition to South Carolina and West Virginia, who Andrew mentioned, Texas, Virginia, Indiana, all this past legislative session adopted 3 of the 4 metrics that he referenced to enhance their system. So we seem to be hitting kind of a critical mass, and most states are doing this legislatively.
Well, talk about legislation. We have Senator Sharon Moriwaki who raised her hand for a question. Go ahead, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. I do have some questions about your internship and the data that you collect, because we've been very supportive of internships as a way to bring students from college or even high school into the workforce and have them experience it. And it's been that way for quite a long time through our apprenticeship program first and the internship program now, building upon some of the lessons learned. But I'm just wondering whether for employers who don't see the benefit of that, because, you know, we need to see that, okay, if I have an intern, am I going to spend more time with the intern than having the intern learn the job? And maybe it's a good thing, because sometimes interns find that that's not the job they want. So I'm just wondering if there's any data on what is a successful internship and what kinds of things do employers need to know. This is what you need to do. This is how it can be very effective and beneficial, because now you've got a loyal employee who knows the job, or have a career in your firm. Has there been anything in terms of the components of internship that would make it successful and beneficial for employers?
For employers, yeah, that's such a great question. We're actually doing about 3 different studies on that right now. We have a report coming out, I think, on Monday, and actually not written by Strata, but we sponsored it, and looking at sort of this exact from the employer side, what makes internships beneficial or apprenticeships beneficial, and what makes it beneficial for the student. I mean, I think, and we're also just talking to a lot of employers to understand their ROI, how they measure it. And it kind of varies depending on the type, because some employers are really looking to use it as a talent pipeline. If they're a large employer, they have a lot of entry-level needs, then this is a key talent pipeline. Others are, are doing it more sort of corporate social responsibility, and maybe they don't see the ROI, or, there's different kind of motivations. So we'll hope to have more to come, but I guess I would say from the student's perspective, it's definitely gaining skills and gaining relationships in that field.
I think from the employer's perspective, if they know what's involved, I think, and what could be possible positive outcomes, you might have more internships opening up. I mean, we want to bring people in the public sector, but not all department employees or managers, know what they need to do with interns to make it a beneficial experience, both for the student and for the office, the manager.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, you need to see gains in things like your cost to hire or your retention rates, things like that. So if you're able to cut down on those recruiting and retention costs, then that's kind of the number one things that employers are looking for. Yep.
And I think because employers have a problem with the revolving door, it really is important, because every time a new person comes in, you've got to retrain or reorient. So some of those kinds of benefits should be included in your report, or what employers say about what has been beneficial or what some of the problems might be. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Strata. In the remaining time, Nicole, would you kindly, you had 5 elements or 5 indicators. What is the overall average for Hawaii? If you can respond to that, and then as we close this, perhaps invite them to the fact that in October you're releasing another study that's an update to this. So I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, so we don't do overall averages across the 5. I think you summed it up really well earlier, where some of the biggest strengths we see in Hawaii are the data collection. I think also the affordability, especially for low income students. And then some of the areas where we see a lot of opportunity are in the work-based learning and in alignment with talent needs in the state. And yes, the updated report will be published on October 16th. And so it'll have a lot more state by state data compared to that first year. And we'd love to, come back or answer any questions as that comes out.
Great. Well, we want to thank the Strata team for this presentation. As you can see, you had a very engaged audience, a lot of questions, great discussion. So we want to thank everyone for being a part of this webinar. Also to note that the recording of this will be posted on our WDC website. So in case you want to review it or you want to have somebody else take a look at it, it will be there and available. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend, everyone, and aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.